The thing that makes, I feel like, DevOps kind of unique among a lot of the cultures and movements we have, especially within tech, is that notion of community, right?
So I think when we talk about the DevOps community, like a lot of things, people are going to see it differently. And I think DevOps Days is a sort of a good reflection of how it might be different. So if you go to DevOps Days, some places will have much more ops than devs. Rare that you'd have more devs than ops. You may have the community here in Chicago. You've got the community in Austin. You've got the community in Ghent in Belgium, where it all began to begin with. And so these communities are all interconnected, and we share practices, and there's communication. At the same time, you're going to have your own sort of flavor within your own town. But I think the community practices and ethos is common across the area, which is this idea of sharing, the idea of cooperating. It's not an us versus them. It's how do we all work together? It's an openness. It's an authenticity.
When we talk about the DevOps community, like one of the premier kind of grassroots community organizations is the DevOps Days organization. It's global, it's around the world. They have them here in Austin, they have them all over the US, they have them all over Europe, Asia, South America, they have them everywhere. And those all started really just as a grassroots movement of people saying like, hey, let's get together and let's talk about this stuff. And it's interesting because unlike a lot of the other user conferences you see, it's not very corporate. There are some vendors there. It's all about the hallway track. It's all about the talks. It's all about the lightning talks. It's about the connections there. And you will see folks make connections at these DevOps Days conferences to solve problems, to think about things in new ways, come up with new processes that you will not see in any other kind of conference. It's really kind of magical the way that it's done and how it just comes together out of a few folks in an area that just really care.
So back in 2009, Patrick Dubois was watching the Velocity conference from Belgium, his home, and he got really jazzed and excited about what was going on there, particularly the presentation by John Allspaw, which was about 10 plus deploys a day, which back then was mind-blowing. And he decided he was going to do a similar conference in Ghent in Belgium. So he created a 2-day conference and he named it DevOps Days, which was not a phrase that had been used before. A lot of people came away from that really excited. One of them was John Willis, who then got back to the States, got together with Damon Edwards, Andrew Schaefer, Jesse Robbins, and said, hey, let's put on a show.
I'd known Damon Edwards, and we were having these conversations. So I started running these things called Bar Camp BSMs. In fact, the first one we ran was Austin. And so that was sort of happening, and I came back, I said, Damon, no more Bar Camp. Yeah. There's this thing called DevOps Days. Yeah. And in fact, at that point, I was already involved with Chef. Jesse Robbins was the chair of Velocity. Yeah. So I got a bunch of people together and said, what if we run a DevOps Day? After the 2 days, we wanted to connect it to, at that point, Velocity was the hottest technology, right, especially for operations people. Yeah. And so we ran it the 2 days right after it. Everybody was there from around the world anyway. Yeah. And that was it was at LinkedIn, and that was in Mountain View in 2010. Then we ran one in 11, and the next thing you know, there's thousands of them.
In fact, let me tell you how I ended up at DevOps Days in 2010. I got this email from someone I've never heard of about this community I've never heard of. But I decided, why not? And so I go down there. And by the way, that person was Damon Edwards and John Willis. And this movement was called DevOps. And I would say I felt like here was a group of people I've been looking for at least 15 years. And I think what was so magical to me was that this is a community of not just kindred spirits and fellow travelers, but it was also avid learners. There was a humility that none of us had all the answers, and it was just, you can't go to something like that when you're on a quest, a decade-long quest, without that just genuinely moving you. So ever since then, right, that changed the trajectory of who I've been hanging out with.
We saw in our own lives the change that DevOps would make. And so we had a lot of success there. And so that's where we said, hey, we should do DevOps Days Austin, and like that should be a thing, right? It shouldn't just be like DevOps Days Silicon Valley, but like I think we did the first one in the U.S. that was not in Silicon Valley.
What I remember from all the early DevOps days is that everyone had a piece of the better way. And when they shared it, it was inspirational. It set the bar of what was possible. And I think it created ambition, of others, not just to replicate it, but to beat it. And then to share that again, in some other venue, which is, I think, the mark of a very productive group of people.
We want it to be a place where people can like learn together, grow together, advance their career together. That's the community that people are looking for, and like we want to be that for those, because without that, you kind of feel isolated and not around your tribe of people that really care about these same topics.
I can't overstate just how much I've learned since I was first introduced to the DevOps community. The instant I saw, his opening address, the first talks, I knew I had found my tribe.
The DevOps movement I've been privileged to be a part of since 2010, maybe, pretty early on, especially through the DevOps Days communities and all that jazz. And what I learned was DevOps is a bunch of nerds coming together trying to find their tribe. Something I've recently talked to my daughter about is she's looking to find new friends because she's moving schools. I told her, well, it took Daddy 20 years to find his tribe. And that's the DevOps community, where we are there to fix problems together. There's many years of my life I had to wake up at 3 a.m. because there was a system called Nagios that told me my server was down. And I would be like, why am I waking up at 3 a.m. for this? There's gotta be a better way to do this. And eventually I found a bunch of other system administrators or production engineers or DevOps engineers or SREs or whatever you want to call them, that we came together to try to fix this problem by breaking down the silos around us.
It is a very empathetic community. That was one thing that really stood out. And I think that is another aspect of building the DevOps culture, is you have to have empathy. So you have to provide them the support, the tooling, to be able to go through the journey of transformation, where they might be working in different silos and now you're breaking down different silos. So now you're going to be stepping into someone's arena where they were not before. So you have to have empathy for each other. That is a message that is repeated again and again, at least in DevOps days.
From the moment that I read the Phoenix Project, I felt seen, I felt understood. And so being at an event, it's like immediate, you can walk in the door and know no one. And someone's going to walk up to you and the conversation's going to be easy because you all have pretty similar shared experiences, even though the exact details are different, but there's a lot of commonality.
The DevOps community is anyone who is working on an engineering team or in an operations team or in a security team, or anyone who touches any aspect of the software development lifecycle. You are part of the development DevOps community. Beyond that, I would say that it also includes the support staff at any DevOps community event. If you are working in event management for a DevOps company, you are part of the DevOps community.
It's a community that's not just same folks, but it keeps growing and new people are coming in.
I think the thing that people don't realize about the DevOps community is it's not just engineers, it's not just security folks. There are quote unquote non-technical roles that are very, very important in the DevOps community. Whether you've got folks in HR, whether you've got folks in sales, whether you've got folks in project management or leadership, right? I mean, like none of us would have jobs if it wasn't for HR and sales. They are part of this community, right? They make things happen in ways that I think are really important, especially when we talk about having context for the work that we do, right? None of these products, none of these orgs are operate on an island. They don't sell themselves, right? We don't get paid by ourselves. We don't get hired by ourselves. A lot of these DevOps days and other community events, there's huge opportunities for recruiting there. That's half the reason why people go, whether they want to land a new job, whether they want to just break into the industry for the first time and get some mentorship from folks that are in it. I think it's super, super important that we not only recognize folks who are outside of technical roles, but we really encourage more of their participation as well.
We're not trying to put people back into silos by saying you're either DevOps or you're not. If you are curious about DevOps or actively a DevOps practitioner, you are part of the community.
A lot of DevOps communities are all about sharing experiences. I helped to run DevOps Days Seattle, and it's a very culturally, community-driven conference, and we try to make sure to have a wide variety of perspectives on what DevOps is. And I think that's key to helping practitioners and also especially new folks to the area of DevOps understand that it is this big, strange, complicated thing, but there are ways that it can help you, and there are core ideas there that could help.
I think for me, when I was individually doing DevOps work, it had a huge impact because otherwise I was trying to solve these problems that I didn't know what other people were doing with them. I didn't know how other people were doing it, and you're just kind of always reinventing the wheel, right?
Yeah.
So being able to go to these conferences and meet people and learn from them was huge. And I think that also is going to continuously move DevOps itself forward as people keep iterating on it, right? Continuous iteration.
Some of the biggest benefits of being involved in the DevOps community, I think, is really about that educational aspect, right? Of course, there's networking, meeting people, there's bringing back the tools and ideas that you learn about, but it's really about that shared kind of educational aspect where if you go to a meetup that's DevOps focused, or you go to a conference that's DevOps focused, or just talk to someone in the community on a Slack channel, you'll realize that everyone's kind of targeting doing the same thing. They're there to learn, they're there to help educate. And usually the people most active in those communities are going to be the ones that really try to help you do those things. And so for me, I think that's definitely the biggest part of it.
The other part of the community is trying to share all that knowledge, trying to share all that information. And because the COMS framework, which is one way of measuring a DevOps transformation at a company, the last letter of COMS is sharing. And it's crucial to the community, is to share that knowledge, share that idea, share the information that you learned so that the next person doesn't go through the same pain.
One reason that I love to get involved with the communities is that you hear all of these different perspectives on here's the problem that we have, here's how we're trying to solve it, and it's a great opportunity to learn about the problems in a space.
This whole DevOps ecosystem was built around this idea of collaboration and us teaching one another.
I think the biggest strength is being able to have a place where you can talk and commiserate sometimes, because being a change agent in an organization is really hard. And so we see from a community perspective that it's a way that shared stories, shared experiences, helping if one person's doing well at something, they can teach the other person on how to maybe bring that into their organization.
Being new to anything can be a little intimidating. I think the benefit is that once you realize that it's not that intimidating, the people are very welcoming, and everyone's trying to learn. The reason we're talking about DevOps is because people are trying to do something better. They're trying to learn, and they're trying to apply this to maybe their day job or to communicate and educate other people. And those people tend to be very empathetic or just welcoming.
I really enjoy working with the community. I'm also a people person. And I would say that the other great thing is you can be a people person, an extrovert, and really enjoy it. But it's also very accepting of a lot of people who are technically traditionally introverts. So you have things like open spaces where you set up topics that day on the fly, and then you have groups of people come together. Those are very comfortable, safe type of environments that you have people who would normally not speak up, very, very willing to share both what they've learned as well as be vulnerable and say, here's something I have a problem with. Does anybody have an idea how they've gone about it? So I think that's the other thing is it's not just the shaking hands and kissing babies. It's represented the broader industry.
The biggest strength of the DevOps community is the community itself, to me, and I think that's a natural extension of a bunch of the other communities that we have in tech, but particularly when we think of things like open source. The idea of community in tech has always been driven around this idea of sharing what you know, in addition to sharing the tools and the other things that you build along the way that help you out. And I think when it comes to DevOps, the community is the strength because we have been doing that. When you ask me the question, you think of things like DevOps Days, you think of all the other events that are out there, the meetups, the coffee ops that people go to. All of those are really designed around sharing, right? And sharing that information and helping each other out. But then you cross that into open source and you think of all the tools that we use, right? How many people use tools like, Terraform or Kubernetes or all of these things that might have a company backing them, but they are free open source software that you can take and you can modify and you can ideally give back the changes that you've made and the improvements that you've made. So I think that's the biggest strength is really just the community of sharing.
A lot of DevOps communities focus a lot on soft skills and culture rather than focusing deeply on the tools because there are just so many tools in so many different areas that DevOps touches. So anytime you get involved with a DevOps community, they might be talking about a specific tool that day, but in order to talk about the whole concept of DevOps, you need to kind of broaden it out a bit and get back to that root of culture. So I think that causes some challenges in the DevOps space because a lot of folks get into it to try to learn about these tools and how they can use them in their work. And a lot of folks are frustrated when they learn it's not just the tools, it's the people.
I think the strengths of the DevOps community come from what the practice is supposed to be. And the practice is supposed to be dev having empathy for ops, ops having empathy for dev. And if the practice is built around empathy, then the community is going to draw empathetic people. It's going to be inhabited by empathetic people that expands from just how do we do capitalism together to I care about these people. And so as they move from company to company, from open source project to open source project, from service to service, you still care about the people and care about what's going on with them. And so it extends beyond the software and the hardware.
I think it's important to be involved in the DevOps community because it doesn't work without its community. If I don't actively participate in the DevOps community, I don't know what people are doing today. I don't know what the best of the best is. I don't know what my friends are trying at their companies and whether or not it's working. And similarly, I can't tell people what I'm doing and what I'm seeing and see how I can help improve what is going on at other people's companies and in other people's teams with my own experiences. It's collaborative by nature, and if you don't actively participate in the community, then you can't benefit from it, and the community can't benefit from you, and our progress kind of slows down.
Someone once said, you're only as smart as the average of the top 5 people you hang out with. And so if you believe that, right, then there's no better place than to be hanging out with the DevOps community.
I think there's a great benefit to those companies who allow their people to participate in communities. And when I say allow, I don't mean that they give them permission, but the idea that they would encourage them and maybe help sponsor some of the things. You don't become a member of the community by studying it. You become a member by going out, by talking to people, sharing what you know, asking questions, listening. It's all about gaining trust. So it behooves companies to encourage their people to go out and participate. You're there not just to see what you can bring in as far as revenue, but also how can you work within the larger community, and that benefits whatever company you may be. I think there is a leap of faith that has to happen when companies allow or encourage their employees to go to these events on company time and not take vacation days.
So why should companies encourage their employees to be part of the DevOps community? I think it's mostly so that they can, allow their employees to become part of that community so they can be educated, share their experiences, and really to bring things back. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all trying to be part of communities, A, to give back, but B, to really learn new things. And those new things are often things we can bring back to our teams to say, hey, I talked to so-and-so and I learned that they're doing things this way, or they suggested we take a look at this tool. And yes, that is networking. You've met someone, but you've also really provided a connection. And so I think it's a disservice to not have your communities your employees really go out and kind of connect with others, because you are learning a lot when you're with them.
Based on what I've experienced, I think DevOps is primarily influenced by the community, and who's speaking the loudest in the community, who's present and who's having and leading those conversations. Oftentimes, I think companies think that their products are influencing the community, but largely it's the people that are standing at the forefront of those products that are starting the conversations and starting the debates.
So I think the important thing for companies to realize about community is that these communities are going to kind of flock to and gravitate towards the companies that they see that are contributing to the communities, whether it's by sponsorships, whether it's by hosting, any ways that companies make themselves visibly part of the community, that community is going to be more willing to want to use their products. So companies that aren't part of these communities kind of get left behind. And then once they realize the importance of it, they start playing catch up. Well, you can't lead from behind.
One thing I hear coming up a lot in these communities is companies are trying to understand open source. What does it mean for them? They're used to being in this world of trying to make a profit. Open source doesn't sound like it works very well with that. But as a company, you can get involved in open source to be part of the conversation. The community is saying we have these problems, teach us about your solutions. And I think open source involvement by companies is a huge way that they do that.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of, especially companies, conceptualize open source as a product that is free, right? Yeah. Open source to me is essentially sharing information, right? Maybe it's about a product, maybe it's a practice, maybe it's a cookbook, right? Whatever it is, all these things that you are saying, hey, the community is going to get together, we're going to talk about it, we're going to figure out what works, and we're going to push this thing that we're going to keep improving on. The idea is that it's going to improve over time. If you look at how Linux started, you look at how some guy on a message board on a 386 developing a kernel, which now runs pretty much most of the internet, right? Because the community of people came together for larger things. Elasticsearch, right? Originally started out as a recipe indexing program, and now it has become this backbone of search and indexing that a lot of people rely on, right? So it does really speak to what the community says when somebody takes this thing and uses it in a way that it was never designed to do, but it solved these problems, and they were able to, and they give that back to the community and say, check this out.
If you think of it transactionally, I think you're thinking of it the wrong ways. It's like thinking, what do I take versus what do I get versus am I going to contribute to a community because I feel this community is important. I want to be a part of this community, and I know that being a part of it is a valuable thing in and of itself.
I admit one of the things I'm excited to also see is companies that aren't traditional tech companies are starting to show up. They're starting to be places like Open Source Summit had new companies that aren't necessarily developers of the open source. They were just users, end users, and now they're starting to come into the open source community and saying, I can share, I can do something.
Dell does a lot of sponsoring of both big events as well as smaller meetups. We're big supporters behind Austin DevOps Days.
Honestly, I think, it's interesting when this started, who showed up early. We didn't have booths in the first 2 or 3 years. You paid a sponsorship and you got nothing. But probably Dell was one of the first, early, especially in Austin. I think Dell has been an incredible community participant in this DevOps thing.
Dell has always been like a Austin staple, right? I've never worked there myself, but lots of friends have, and I know, it's a great company. But y'all came alongside us and sponsored even from the very beginning with the project, Sputnik project, and I thought that was really cool. And you're like, oh, we should run Linux on a Dell laptop, right? And we're all like Linux, junkies, right? And
it came together at a nice time. You all were starting out. Project Sputnik was starting out, and so I think there was a lot of, hate to use the word, but synergies there.
I feel like Dell's always been kind of a supporter of that.
There are a ton of meetups if you want to get involved in DevOps Days or DevOps meetups. DevOps Days, the tickets are relatively inexpensive. Meetups are free. And so those you can go and you just start meeting people. and then they tell you about something else and you learn from them and you develop friendships. And those are very easy ways to go on a Thursday night, couple hours, and eat pizza with folks.
I think one of the things that we discovered during the pandemic was that there are a lot of ways that you can find community without being physical proximity to one another. Sure, being physical proximity is great, but there's a lot of reasons why you can't. But that doesn't mean you can't be part of the community and contribute. There's Discords, there's Slacks, there are social media groups. There, you can go onto GitHub and start plugging away at projects there, interacting with people on there. Stack Overflow. There's TikTok. Even there are a lot of ways that you can contribute to and become part of this community that don't involve you actually sitting in proximity with someone.
So I mean, and the community is looking out for the future trends and evolving thoroughly. So I mean, if you're not involved in the DevOps community, I highly suggest that you do.
I mean, all in all, we sit here and we talk about all the various aspects of DevOps, whether it's tooling, whether it's practitioners, but in essence, it's community. That's what started it. That's what DevOps is about. It's about people coming together and communicating to work through problems. You don't need all the tooling. You can do DevOps on a piece of paper. You can do DevOps on a whiteboard. What DevOps really needs is that community in order for it to be functional and successful in the past, currently, and even into the future.
I want people to understand that DevOps is not any one person or any one tool or even any one community. It does not work without all of these tools working together, without all of our teams working together, without all of our separate communities working together. It has to be a collaborative effort, and that includes you, whether you think that you have anything to contribute or not. Most people do have something to contribute, and you may not know that until you talk to somebody else, until you participate in the community yourself, but everybody has something that they can contribute, and everybody has something that they can learn.
I think we've always practiced that idea of like, we're running this, but we need help. And there's spots for you. Anybody who wants to join, you can come on in and be a part of it.